Stan will not be joining us for this review, unfortunately, as he is otherwise engaged and probably will be for a while. So these little regular, like, general reviews are probably going to be done by me solo for a little while, which is kind of intimidating. I'm not used to not having a foil when I do these, and so I'm encumbered with the task of having to make my voice the only thing heard and still make that interesting. But I'm gonna do my best. I have two things to talk about in this Toy Story 3 review. The first is obviously the film, and the second is that this is the first film that I have seen in 3D. 3D by 21st century standards. So I want to cover both of those things. I love Pixar, and this movie is a good indication, just like a flow chart of why I love this company. They haven't done a single bad film since they've been in the business, and yes, that includes The Incredibles. It's really kind of unfortunate because no matter how many times you try to safeguard yourself when you do something like my Incredibles review, you are always misunderstood, and I've gotten so many emails asking me how I could possibly hate The Incredibles. I didn't hate it. The Incredibles was the only Pixar film that I felt had a big monkey wrench sticking out of it, and I wanted to talk about the monkey wrench. But has nothing to do with the film being good or bad. It was good, and all the films they have done have been either good or outstanding. And I have always felt that Toy Story fell into that outstanding category. It was not only the first in what is now, I suppose, a trilogy, but it was also the first real Pixar film that was released, and it absolutely knocked my socks off back in 1996. Not even just because of the way it looked, but because it was like a return to what Disney had been doing. And I think there's a general consensus that pretty much everyone agrees. I would say starting with The Lion King, most people would say starting with Pocahontas, that Disney took a nosedive and was never able to recover. They were never able to get back to that quality of just the care put into not just the animation, but the characters and the story, from The Little Mermaid going on to, if you like The Lion King, once again, I would say it ended at Aladdin. But I think there's a general understanding that by the mid-'90s, they had really started to dip. And Toy Story was the movie that made me say, it made me take note of Pixar. And I remember saying to myself, this is the new Disney. This is the new standard of quality that other people are going to have to compete with. And we see DreamWorks competing with them, and Lord knows how many other animation companies that are trying to do what they do, and none of them have risen to that challenge. None of them are Pixar good. And so I love the Toy Story movies. I love the first Toy Story. The second one I didn't love, but I liked it. I actually felt that there were things done in Toy Story 3 that improved upon what I considered to be shortcomings of the second one. I liked the second one a great deal, but I thought there was too much focus on Woody. It was essentially Woody's movie, and everyone else was just kind of a sub-character moving around his experience. And I didn't really like the surprise toy villain at the end. I thought that was kind of a hokey sort of, oh, we gotcha kind of reveal. But I thought that the idea of there being kind of a negative toy in the bunch was a good idea. Toy Story 3 improves upon all of this. This is literally everyone's story. This is the culmination of everything that these characters have been through together for both the two previous films. It has somewhat of a similar plot to the second film as well, because they kind of have to decide between... essentially, in the second film, everybody sort of realized that Andy is not going to be a kid forever. He's going to grow up, and they're not going to get played with anymore. And they had to kind of make a decision between being admired under glass at least Woody did. He had to make a decision between being admired for eternity, forever, under glass, or to stick with his kid. In this movie, that moment has come. Andy is going off to college, and the toys through happenstance, end up at this daycare center, and they have to make the decision between being played with for eternity or going back and taking care of their kid. So it's essentially that same one-track storyline that the second one had, but this has a layer and depth that I felt was absent from the second one. There are backstories and subplots for pretty much every single character that's put in there. The predominant ones is some of the new characters, like I think the Teddy Ruxpin kind of knockoff. I can't remember what his name was, but he has a story that is actually kind of tragic, and even though he ends up being a villain in this movie, you can't help but sympathize with him to a certain extent, and you can't help but really feel for him. And Pixar always makes me do that. He always makes me feel about these characters as if they were your friends, and as if they were these people that you've been through so much with. I mean, this is different than something like Shrek, where it's basically just one-liners every other minute, and you're laughing, but you don't really care. I find myself caring about these characters, though this is going to sound strange, almost the way I do the Star Trek cast, the original series, where it doesn't just feel like these are characters that you're invested in, they feel like you're friends. And I know that's ridiculously hokey, and it's ridiculously sentimental, and it's ridiculously sappy, but that is honestly how I feel. That is how sharp the writing is here, and that's how much Pixar cares. And I know that this company has said many times that they're not interested in making sequels for the sake of making another dime off of a franchise. They've said that they will make sequels if they have a good story in mind, if they feel that there are more stories you can tell with these characters, that their story maybe isn't finished yet, and they have a definitive idea. And their track record for sequels, I know they've only done 2 that I'm aware of. I think Toy Story 2 and 3 are their only sequels, if I'm not mistaken. If this is what they do with their sequels, then I say, more power to them, and I can't wait to see Cars 2. Because this was a phenomenal job. I think that of the 3 films, this is probably the best in terms of its story. As far as the story goes, I think this is the most layered, the most in-depth, and the one that really made me care the most. I still have a soft spot for the first film because it was the first, and I think that a lot of people think that the first movie kind of makes it best by default. And I'm kind of in that camp with Toy Story. I still like the first movie the best. But as far as story goes, I think this is the best they've done in the trilogy. This film does a very good job of balancing lightheartedness with sentimentality, with a really dark tone in a lot of places. I mean, there are a lot of tragic stories that a lot of these toys have. I mean, the things that happened to Jessie in her toy life have been very tragic, and the things that happened to this bear in the film is extremely just heartbreaking. But they do a very good job. They never spend too much time on one of these themes before moving on to something else, and so you're not constantly, as I felt you were in The Incredibles. I know a lot of people disagree, and that's fine. But you're not constantly stuck in the mud of just feeling sorry and depressed for these people. They do a really good job of switching tracks so much that you don't always feel stuck in one particular mood. But I think this is also the darkest of the 3, certainly. I mean, it gets really dark in the end when the toys are preparing for death, literally. I mean, you've got all the toys just accepting their fate and just waiting to die. And if you haven't seen the movie, I'm sorry for spoiling that, and you'll just have to see it to find out what I mean. But that kind of caught me off guard. And really, really got to me in a way. I mean, that just cemented how important all these characters are, and so I thought it was a dark point in the film, but I thought it was very well done for that moment where we figure out that these people have each other, literally no matter what. I thought the Spanish Buzz Lightyear was awesome. I thought that was a very interesting twist on the Buzz thinking that he is a real astronaut, which they've tried to keep alive in the other movies. In the first film, that was a big part of what the first movie was about, and they've tried to keep that spirit alive in the other two. Didn't do a great job in the second film, as far as I was concerned, by essentially just replacing one Buzz Lightyear with another. But putting him in Spanish mode, I thought was a very interesting way of keeping that spirit alive, and my hat's off to them for that. That was one of the high points of the film for me. I essentially all the general reviews I do are a spoiler alert, and so you probably want to stop listening to this now if you haven't seen the movie. But one of the things that I thought was very well done in this film is that this is the last time these characters are all going to be together, unless they make another one, which I hope they do. And so I think it's very important, and it was a very good decision on the part of the people writing this, to have Andy explain one by one why he loves these toys and what they all mean to him. And he gives them a send-off that is very touching. And I've had a lot of people ask me, because I guess people didn't realize that I hadn't seen the movie yet, and they asked me if I had gotten choked up during the film. And I'm going to go ahead and let my dignity guard down, and just come out and admit that I have actually gotten choked up at all of the Toy Story films, at some point in the films. They're just that good, and they really do make you care that much, more so than I think a lot of the other Pixar films have, even the really great ones. Things like WALL-E and Finding Nemo. I still think that Finding Nemo was to Pixar what The Fifth was to Beethoven, in my opinion. I think it's the best they've done. They outdid even themselves. They rose above their own standards, and their standards are really damn high. That was the best film they ever did, and it's still one of the best films that I've seen in my movie-going life. But I would definitely see this movie again. I've seen both Toy Story films countless times, and this is definitely going to go into my usual routine when I think of what movies I want to watch. So I think that's just about all I have to say about the film off the top of my head. So now if I could talk a little bit about the 3D, because I had said in my Avatar review, the general review that I did of that I didn't want to see it in 3D because you shouldn't have to rely on a gimmick in order to enjoy the movie. Well, when I said that, I did not realize what 3D meant by 21st century standards. I was thinking about, back when it literally was a gimmick and you had the red and blue 3D glasses and it just kind of looks a little bit different. I didn't realize the innovation of the technology and how it might actually enhance the experience of watching a movie rather than just giving it a few more bells and whistles, which is what I thought it was. And I was absolutely wrong. And I'm very glad that I saw this in 3D. Because it really is a marvel of what they can do. I mean, it's not 3D in the sense that it's just popping out at you. I mean, you guys probably know better than I, because you've probably seen 3D movies a million times by now, and I've just been left in the dust apparently. But it's essentially like they're in the screen, literally. It's like they're acting out the movie in the screen, and I've never seen anything like it before in my life. And for anyone who requested that I review the last Shrek movie that recently came out, I really had no plans to do it. But I took my girlfriend to see Toy Story 3 in 3D, and she insisted that we go and see Shrek in 3D just for the 3D experience. So that's how much it won her over. And I must admit that I am very impressed by the technology and what they're capable of doing with the 3D. And a little humbled in my previous statement of saying that it was just a gimmick, because I don't think it is. I think that it's ushering in a new way of looking at movies. Now, having said that, I do want to say that although it's not a gimmick, it is still, to me, just another effect. And I don't mean just another as if it's something casual. I mean, it's a marvel of technology. But it's a lot like a movie with really good special effects. If I see a crappy movie in 3D, I can talk about the amazing 3D all day long, but it was still a crappy movie. This would be just as good if it wasn't in 3D than if it was. So it still all comes down to the writing to me, and it comes down to how much the writers care and how much they make me care. And Pixar has done that consistently, even with the movies that the Pixar films that didn't make me go nuts, like A Bug's Life and The Incredibles, I still like and I still watch frequently. They're just on the bottom of my list, but that list is still way at the top of movies that I would sit down and watch repeatedly on purpose. So that's about all I have to say about the movie and about the 3D. And kudos to Stand-In Stan. I'm sorry you couldn't be here because I have to bear the brunt of this conversation all by myself. Never done that before, and I hope I did somewhat of a good job. I hope everyone else liked the movie because I loved it. I think it's one of the best that Pixar's done. It stands on its own in comparison to even the first one. So, very good job. Very good job.